Alright, this is same old G. Usually I like to go outside and walk in cool places to make videos, but nowadays I don't know if you can hear it in the back, there's construction everywhere, so I cannot walk in cool places, and it's hobo land so I mean it's like I'm kind of surrounded, but still I want to make a video from my backyard at least or something, and it's basically I want to answer a few questions. Not answer a few questions. I'm sorry. I want to do another pros and cons, and this one is about question asking. So that I've been involved in a group where there's a discussion about mother may I and question asking in the RPG hobby, and I think there is a thing. I just want to establish a few distinctions. So first off, there is maybe a few distinctions to be made about the difference between mother may I and question asking. The hobby, there is a strong and big part of the hobby where it's not. I would not say strong and big. It's maybe too strong of an expression, but there is it is part of the culture to as players. Some people, what they do, they ask question out of character, stop the flow of the game, stop the narration, and start to kind of like think out loud or strategize, or want to clarify with the GM. So there's kind of like this discussion where it's like a back and forth of can I do this? Is there something there that I can do? How far is this? What's the distance for that? How many of those? Do I know someone like this? Is it possible for me to do that? All kinds of questions like that. And these questions, like, for some people, they're not the same. So for some people, there are good and bad questions, like healthy and unhealthy kind of thing. And fair enough. I don't want to argue that. It's kind of, like in anything, there's a lot of it's like spectrums. Spectrums. There's not much we can do about that. So, but for me, that's the same structure. What you do when you indulge in that conversation between the GM and the players. As a player, what you do is you ask permission somehow. You want to know if you can do that. You want to know how far that is, but you don't want to know how far something is if you don't want to do something about that. So it's for me, it's kind of like the same. So I don't want to do it. I don't want to straw man, the idea of mother may I or question asking. But for the sake of this video, let's call it question asking. All right. So we're gonna get rid of the pejorative term that might frustrate some people in these parts. So question asking, the back and forth of trying to clarify stuff, pros and cons. All right, so here we go. So pros, the pros of those of this habit, I would call it a habit. Maybe it's a cultural habit, really embedded in the hobby. You see, it takes many different forms, but it comes from the player. Sometimes it comes from the GM. That's another thing. So it's a whole other animal, and sometimes the GM, kind of like foreshadow things and describe things through question asking with the players, and so that's a whole nother conversation, I think. But that's a question coming from the players. That wants to clarify stuff. So pros, well, obviously, let's say the GM is not describing things well, or let's say the player doesn't listen well. Let's say there is a strategy that the player has in mind, and instead of just like verbalizing it out loud, you just need a quick answer. Just I have this whole plan in my head, And I know that if I just ask this to the GM, I kind of let everyone know around the table, it's, that that this element is important, and then I will act. Then I will have an intention on it, right? And that can be a good thing. That can be an healthy thing. Eventually, I mean, because it will give you an answer. It will clarify stuff. It will allow you to make sure that you don't mess with the reality of the game too much. Obviously, another pros of question asking depends on the context, and depends on the game, and depends on the system, and depends on the genre, and depends on everything. The discussing these topics, is a very relativistic endeavor. And I'm gonna have to make a video about that one day, maybe today, maybe tomorrow. But I mean, it depends on so many things, all the time. It depends on taste. It depends on, and it also depends on, beside depending on system, genre, games, type of style of play, and aesthetic, and all that, because if you play a pulpy game, Roslinger mentioned that recently. If you play a pulpy game, you can wing it more than if you play a very, Call of Cthulhu investigative game where the reality needs to be very hard, which is totally true. I mean, it's a, it's kind of like obvious. So it's, for me, the question asking, the pros, also concern the experience of play that demands it, that needs it. When there's an objective reality to be discovered, it's kind of like part of the game, so it is a tool in these situations. I mean, it is and then once you make peace with that, once you realize that, then there is a better way to do it. So that's a whole nother thing. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Like, there is a certain way to do the question asking that can be very efficient and interesting as well. So phrasing it and utilizing in the right context is can be an healthy tool. So that's a pro, because it will clarify things, it will justify things, it will validate things, and it will clarify the imagination for everyone. And so those are the pros. Context dependent, game style dependent, culture of play dependent. On the other hand, the cons, well, for me, and here is my taste, obviously, but the cons is just that it's very meta. It's an out of character conversation. It's about technicalities. It kills the drama. It kills the momentum. It kills the narration. Because it's tough. It brings everything to a halt, and it creates that back and forth that lasts a few seconds and sometimes minutes. And sometimes also, what you'll notice this, and maybe you've seen it before, but when someone asks a question, it starts like a waterfall of questions, like domino effect of questions, and then completely out. Kills the immersion, kills the narration, and it becomes that very like, okay, so how big is this? Can I do that? Can I do this and this? So I made a video in the past. I made many videos in the past about that. So I want to bring it to another aspect. I don't want to repeat too much on that, but the cons are very about that. For me, it's the cons is a mood killer. Basically, it's just that, and so the first con is that. And the cons are also context dependent, game dependent, style dependent, aesthetic dependent, and all the relativistic stuff that I've mentioned. Because the thing is that, for some people, there are a group that the question asking is the whole experience. There are some people that's the habit is so embedded in or table. I don't know. The habit is so embedded in their play style that it's the meat and potato of the experience. You can see it. Go online, watch live play, and you will see. So I think it's important maybe to establish a few distinction and see how it can be a tool. The question asking can be a tool because in language, just the basic language, and when you ask a question, it's a powerful, very potent thing. Questioning someone, questioning reality, questioning ideas. It's a powerful tool, so it should not be taken lightly, I think, and I think that in the context of a game, in the context of an experience of a game, it is as potent and as powerful as it is in the real world, because it's a language thing, it's a tool. So for the pros, I mean, it's kind of like obvious, but I would argue that for it to be a pro, for it to be interesting, it has to be it has to be parsimonious, it has to be efficient and minimalistic, and like very like at the right moment for the right reason, not out of an habit, so for it to be a pro, for it to be good, for all the reasons I've just mentioned. And in the cons, well, in the cons is that when it becomes a habit, it becomes it becomes the whole attitude, it becomes the whole narration, it becomes the whole experience, and when it becomes like that, it's kind of like this weird back and forth between the GM, where the GM kind of like validate what the player can do, the GM kind of like give permission, the GM kind of like justify, or and it becomes this weird stuff where you're out of character, talking about what's going on, and most of the time also it's technicalities, because there is another aspect that we shall discuss. Ivan Mike in the comment section mentioned something important. He says, a fluid reality, I mean, messing around with the coherence of the world, and messing around with the coherence of the reality is not to be taken lightly. For example, there are stuff that has been established, and you don't want to mess around with it, because when you go without asking questions, let's say for example you say, I don't like questions, I don't want to ask questions and all that, and so as a player you gotta be really proactive, and you gotta kind of like just like wing it. You wing the thing, you just go for it, and you kind of like go about what you want to do, and you don't ask questions, you don't ask permission, right? And some GM, they ask GM that are really very authoritarian, and you really want to stick to their description, and it's their world and it's their ideas, and if you mess around with that, it kind of like, for some reason, some people it's out of ego and narcissism, some people it's because they really need that coherence, and for the group as well, just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, so they don't want one player to mess the aesthetic. So all these good reasons, and so there is, I do agree with that, but like, for example, I do think that we need to make a distinction between well-established lore and world and situation, that has been established over time, and so you don't mess with that. That will destroy the coherence. But the little thing that just been said 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, and it's about little distances, or it's about how many people, or the color of something, or these little thing that has just been established like maybe 5 minutes ago, right? I don't think it's the end of the world just to wing it and to go around it. That's my opinion. That's my perspective, my taste. But it's part of the cons of not asking questions, for example. Because asking questions. One of the cons is that when you don't do it, when you the reason why it's important sometimes to do it, but also the reason why It's fun not to do it. um, One of the consequences of not doing it is that it will sometimes it will change the the situation, or the current situation, or the current perspective that people have on a scene, or on a situation, and that comes down to player agency and all kind of stuff. So yeah, so just to make a summary, I think the questions can be a great tool depending on the game, depending on the needs, depending on how it's said and done. If it's not a habit that meaning that it's not like 80% of the conversation, or 70%, not even 50%. I would argue that maybe one or two questions for a 3-hour session. If you start going beyond that, but that's my taste. Again, it's my taste. So those are the pros. So it can be very powerful to describe, validate, justify, define, strategize, and just bring everything together, right? And the cons, it's a drama killer, it's a mood killer, it's a slowdown of momentum, slowdown of energy, a narrative energy. It kills narration. It brings the game to a halt. It can be very boring because it creates this back and forth, and then it can become a habit. That's the con, because asking question, when it can lead to player becoming lacking of confidence. And I do think this hobby needs self-confidence, self-confidence in your ideas, self-confidence in the way you can describe the world, and take agency, and take responsibility, and if you become this player that is just like super passive and just asking questions before even thinking about doing something, it can become a very boring experience, and I see it many times over the years. So that's why that's my perspective on it. Anyway, those are the pros and cons, I think, of asking questions. And yeah, and I think this whole idea of mother may I and question asking is a very subtle distinction between the two. So I just want to talk about question asking in general, including mother may I, and including the very useful and necessary questions that might sometimes show up in play. So just wrapping up all together and say, hey, these are the pros and cons of this linguistic tool. All right, thank you for watching. Let me know what you guys think.